A very good morning to everyone who's joining us today. Today, we are going to go through a research that was conducted recently, sponsored by Akeyless, on what the data reveals about AI agent identity risks. To have a fair assessment of the results, I have with me Callum Budd. I'll have him introduce himself in a bit. The way we will approach this data and information is we'll go through the premise of the research as well as look into what the data says. And following which, hopefully, I can share some insights based on the conversations that I have with customers and prospects on Akeyless as well. With that, let me hand it off to Callum to introduce himself, to see what we are going to cover today, and also to introduce the firm that conducted this research. Callum, over to you.
Great, thanks, Suresh. Lovely to be here and really looking forward to sharing some amazing research findings. We've got loads of great data to run through with you today. So using our findings from the research, we'll be able to give you a really clear view of how quickly AI agents are moving into enterprise environments and why that creates new identity risk discussion for security teams.
Let's jump into the data then.
Great, thank you very much. So, hi again. So, I'm Callum. I'm the research director at MRA Research, and I personally have been working in the IT and tech research space for about 15 years, working alongside leading cybersecurity businesses like Akeyless. And for anyone not familiar with MRA, we're a specialist B2B research agency who work with lots of technology and B2B organizations, producing high quality, impactful research and develop data driven insights. So just to summarize this study, the aim was really clear at the outset. We wanted to understand how AI agents are reshaping identity risk. And in particular, we wanted to look at where agents are being used, what kind of access they have, how they're being authenticated, and whether existing governance and identity controls are keeping pace. And to very, very quickly summarize the scope and the methodology, we ran a survey of 400 IT and security leaders across the US and the UK. And those respondents came from a mix of industries and organization sizes, and they were recruited through a multi-stage qualification process. So the results I share with you guys today are not a theoretical view of AI agent security. They're really grounded in what IT and security leaders are actually seeing in their working environments. So with that in mind, we'll start quickly with adoption, because that is ultimately the first thing that we need to discuss. So one of the clearest findings that from the research is that AI agents are no longer experimental technology sitting off to the side. They're already operating inside enterprise environments. This number on the left-hand side tells you that 94% of organizations report some level of AI agent use today, and more than half say that agents are already deployed broadly across multiple parts of the business. And in IT and tech firms, adoption is even more aggressive, with nearly 2/3 who report widespread deployment. And that's really, really important because it changes the way we need to think about this topic. We're not just talking about pilots or isolated innovation projects. And the other point just to note here quickly is this is accelerating. Organizations expect AI agents to grow their usage by another 44% over the next 12 months. So whatever the access picture looks like today, it's likely to become even more complex very quickly. And there's a key identity risk that these agents have got, and they're already accessing meaningful data or sensitive data. So more than 8 in 10 say that AI agents can access that sensitive level of data. And it means that this is the starting point. AI agents are already being deployed inside enterprises. They've got access to sensitive systems and workflows, and that scale is likely to rapidly increase. So Suresh, I know this is something you're seeing in the market as well. AI agents moving from experimentation into production very quickly.
Yeah, I want to tell you guys a little bit of a story about our own product journey, where when the advent of ChatGPT happened, we started, of course, being a fast-moving startup, seeing what's happening in the market. We started thinking about how AI agents would evolve and what sort of solution or product was needed to help our customers secure agentic interactions. At that time, I would say this was about 12, 18 months back, the origins of ChatGPT. right? Our thinking was that agentic adoption, broad-based within organizations, would probably take a year or two. 2037 was more likely when it would happen, and it has surpassed all our expectations in terms of speed of development, the time to market, and how fast agentic adoption is happening. And this data, and this is the reason companies like us do these research to get intelligence from what is happening in the market that informs our go-to-market and product development. So this is actually, even the large analyst firms like Gartner, they predicted that this was something that would happen in 2028 and 2029, but 94% of organizations use AI agents. 84 of them access sensitive data. That is a rapid adoption. And the fact that it is accelerating is also pretty impressive. I do see this continuing to accelerate, and I do see this as the biggest enabler for enterprises, but also the biggest threat. Callum.
Great, thanks, Suresh. Great to have that additional context as well. Okay, so this next question looks at the types of credentials that are used by AI agents or other machine workload identities. And you can see from this chart that the most common answer is API keys. Nearly 7 in 10 organizations are using API keys in this way. But for me, perhaps most worryingly in this chart, is that more than half are still relying on static usernames and passwords. So you can see the 52% there. And on the right-hand side, another headline finding from this research is that every organization surveyed reported using some form of persistent credential somewhere in their AI agent environment. So this isn't just a marginal issue. It's very common and a very common part of how AI agents are being deployed today. And at the same time, more modern approaches are not yet as widely adopted. So less than half said that they use short-lived credentials. So the issue is not simply that organizations are using credentials, because of course agents need to authenticate, but the issue is that so many are still authenticating with credentials that can live for a long time and become really difficult to track or to control. So Suresh, we're seeing that this is where the security implications become a little bit more tangible. How do you see the findings?
Yeah, this is, of course, one of the most concerning of findings, but there's something I would add here as well. Let us take an example of an AI agent, right? And let us assume that it has access to some of your systems. In a typical environment, when an agent is tasked with an outcome, it has access to multiple systems. Say, for example, it may have access to an employee database. It may have access to a finance system. It may have access to a CRM. It may have access to an on-premise server or application which has to perform the task based on the information that the agent has retrieved. And all of this will require different forms of access. Some will require a database password, some will require an OAuth token, some will require certificates. And so what happens if there are persistent credentials out there is they expose the organization to risk. And this is, of course, most concerning of the agentic interactions, because this is happening right now. And for those of you who may not know, I would suggest that you look up the Verkle breach, where an third-party AI application was being used by an employee internally, and the OAuth token that was used to access the data sources was compromised, leading to significant risk to the company as well. So this persistent credentials, they accumulate risk over time. They get copied, they get embedded into workflows, they get shared between systems, and often remain active long after anyone remembers that they exist. Now, that's manageable when you are dealing in a world with a handful of automation scripts, but it's much harder in an AI-driven environment where multiple systems are being accessed simultaneously, and the action can happen in milliseconds. So this is, of course, one of the most concerning aspects that came out of this research. Callum.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Suresh. And as you say, the acceleration clearly exacerbates this challenge, doesn't it? So yes. A second pattern that we've seen in the data is that AI agent development is happening really quickly and often outside of traditional governance processes that organizations are used to. So you can see here that 72% of organizations say that AI agents are commonly being created using prompt-driven or AI-generated development approaches, often referred to as vibe coding. And that increases the security risk even further. And you can also see that 50% of organizations say developers are regularly bypassing IAM controls in order to keep AI agents operational. And what the data really reflecting here, from my perspective, is pressure. So organizations are under pressure to show progress with AI, to build new use cases, and to get value quickly. And in that environment, these types of teams are making pragmatic decisions to keep things moving. So the risk is not just that AI agents are being adopted, it's that that adoption is happening faster than the security model around it and the security models developing alongside it. So Suresh, this connects, I think, directly to the operational reality that organizations are facing. Does this finding surprise you at all?
Not at all. I mean, let us just go back and think about your respective organizations. When at the origins of ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, most of the teams and functions within your organization start using it. And when they started using it, they were using their own budgets assigned by their businesses to go do it. It wasn't going through any form of IAM controls at all. And you know this. I know this is the way it started with agentic usage started happening within organizations. But then these tools started adding more capabilities. Claude, Cowork, ChatGPT, Codex, and then Claude Code. And you have, from a small experimental agentic project which was funded out of a business unit without IAM controls, without IT oversight, has now become a significant issue where you need those controls now. Otherwise, your applications are being accessed by agents and your systems being accessed by agents, and you have no control of what agents are accessing which system. And I wouldn't say this is because the IAM teams and IT is careless. It's because AI projects often started as these small experiments and now have grown into these business critical workflows much faster than the governance processes could adapt. The challenge is that these shortcuts taken early now have become permanent parts of an environment. This is in my opinion, a wake-up call for IAM organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So the next bit, if we just build on that, we can think about visibility. AI agents are becoming more widespread, and organizations are struggling to maintain a complete view of the credentials and secrets that those agents rely on. Now, on the left-hand side, we can see that as few as 44% say that they know where all of their AI agent credentials or secrets are stored. And what that means, if you flip that, that means more than half cannot say with confidence that they do know where all of that is, which to me is absolutely staggering. And at the same time, we can see on the right-hand side that credentials are being stored across a wide range of locations, such as dedicated secrets managers, cloud provider native services, configuration files, application code, CI/CD tools, and even in some cases, hard-coded or embedded directly into workflows. So to build on Suresh's point, the more dispersed those credentials become, the harder it is to answer those basic and critical questions. So what credentials exist, where they're stored, who owns them, which systems can they access, and what would need to happen if one of those was exposed. So this is really where it becomes both a security challenge and an operating challenge. And Suresh, I've described this as staggering, but how do you see this one?
Oh, this is the most alarming statistic, but here is the interesting piece to this. This is a problem that it existed before the agentic era and has been exacerbated by the agentic era. What I mean by that is, before Akeyless was this unified identity security platform for machines, AI agents, and humans, we had our origins in the world of secrets management. So we have seen the issues associated with secret sprawl, secrets being embedded in code and configuration files, and not being stored or managed centrally, not being rotated automatically. And all of this has now been amplified as a function of an agent. Think about an agent doing a task as a hybrid of a human and a machine, tasked with the same level of responsibilities. It has just exacerbated the problem. If it is true per Gartner that 70% of all enterprise applications eventually will be some form of agents, we have just exposed this problem significantly. It's going to increase the risk manifold. It becomes more important than ever that agents don't have direct access to the systems, and they only have just-in-time ephemeral identities and access only when they need it, only for the task that they need to complete. It's a critical, I would say, a foundational element of planning that needs to happen going forward as agentic adoption in enterprise becomes more mainstream.
Absolutely. Thanks, Suresh. So we also asked our organizations about what concerns them most when it comes to AI agent security. And nearly all respondents believe that AI agents do introduce new security risks. And what stood out is the nature of those risks. So you can see from this chart that the top concerns are not only about AI behavior in a more abstract sense, these are very practical identity and access concerns. So organizations are worried about secrets or credentials embedded in AI agent workflows. They're worried about detecting compromised agents. They're also worried about excessive or unmanaged access to systems and data. And as we just discussed on the previous slide, they're worried about poor visibility into what agents can access once they are deployed. And that tells us something really important. For many security leaders, the AI agent risk conversation is actually starting to move into an identity conversation too. And Suresh, I know you've got a perspective here of why organizations are quite rightly becoming concerned. So what are your thoughts on this one?
So I was just looking at these graphs and I was looking at the axis that has what are all the reasons for the risk. And what I find interesting here is that the concerns are overwhelmingly identity related. Organizations aren't primarily worried about these terms that I used to hear at the early stage of the evolution of AI agents was either the model performance. I've heard about prompt injection as an issue. I've heard about agentic hallucinations as an issue. That's not what you see here. I mean, what the research suggests, it's about access, it's about permissions, it's about credentials, it's about visibility. That's consistent with what we are seeing in our customer and prospect conversations as well. And OWASP, the nonprofit agency for application security, released a top 10 for agentic applications. Please go review that as well. I found it very insightful. And they identify that identity and privilege abuse as one of the core risks facing agentic systems. Now, of course, the reason is simple. Agents are increasingly operating with legitimate access. They inherit permissions, use delegated credentials, and interact directly with business systems. The challenge becomes understanding what an agent should be allowed to do and maintaining control once that access has been granted. Because even with a legitimate access, an agent can take destructive actions.
Right. And we've talked a little bit so far about the outlie and how the land lies, and then we've talked a little bit about some of those concerns, but we also wanted to understand whether those concerns are still theoretical or whether organizations are already seeing some signs of those AI agent related security issues. And from the data, what we are seeing is absolutely that those risks are already materializing. So on the left-hand side, you can see that 2/3 suspect AI agents have already accessed data beyond their intended scope, an emphasis on the word already there. More than 6 in 10 have already had to revoke or rotate AI agent credentials because of that suspected exposure. And furthermore, the thing that hit me straight between the eyes was organizations report spending more than $1 million on average over the past year responding to AI agent identity and credential issues. So ultimately, the data is telling us that many organizations are already experiencing the operational and, perhaps more importantly, financial consequences of managing AI agents with limited visibility and control. And Suresh, this is where we start to see that risk becoming to feel very, very real. And in not just what agents might do in the future, but actually what organizations are having to respond to right now.
Correct. I mentioned earlier in this presentation that AI is the biggest enabler and risk to an autonomous enterprise. And what I mean by that is you can't not adopt AI. You have to. We live in a world where the productivity benefits of AI, as well as what it can do, the benefits of it vastly outweigh the risks. But it has to be done in a way where the risks are managed. And if not, it could be lead to destructive consequences for the enterprise. This is very tangible data, and as we do, we usually conduct these surveys years out, so we can look at how the data is changing. We'll continue to work with folks like Callum to doing that. I forecast that next year when we do this research, that 1 million is going to be much higher. I think we are just scratching the surface of enterprises determining what it costs to fix those issues. I believe most of the issues are yet to be identified. And I believe as the scale of adoption, as we saw in the previous slides, of AI continues to grow, the risks associated with it will grow. And now is the time to actually invest in the systems to secure them so this cost doesn't go up as well. Now, I want to just talk about one more incident. This is the PocketOS incident that was also on the news. Please search for Claude and PocketOS, and you will find what this incident is about. But in a nutshell, what this is a Claude-powered coding agent. It was not supposed to do this. It was supposed to work on some other aspect and task, but it deleted the company's entire database in 9 seconds. Now, it had legitimate access. It had complete authority. There were principles dictated to it that it is not supposed to do it. But in the process of attempting to complete its tasks, it determined that deleting the database was the easier way to go about completing the task. It violated the own principles given to it. What this means is the world of deterministic policies, what an agent can do and cannot do as predetermined aspects, and what it can access and cannot access predetermined, would have worked for the world of machines and humans, won't work for the world of AI agents. And that is what we are seeing in these breaches.
Great, thanks, Suresh. And like you said, it'd be really interesting to see how these findings change as the pace is continuing to accelerate. Another really clear finding from this research is that existing identity and security controls are struggling to operate at the speed of AI systems. So only 7% of organizations believe that their current controls would prevent a compromised AI agent from operating or behaving maliciously. And another 13% say that they could immediately detect the compromised agent. So that means the vast majority would not identify a rogue or compromised agent until it had already started executing. And you can see from the middle and the right-hand side here as well, the timing gap is really significant. On average, organizations estimate it would take about 14 hours to detect a compromised AI agent, and then nearly an additional 6 days to contain and remediate the incident. So that's a very, very different time frame from the way that agents actually operate in real life. And AI agents can take actions really quickly. They can chain tasks together, move across systems using legitimate credentials or approved access paths. So that really does put us behind where we need to be. So Suresh, can you share a couple of your thoughts and experiences on existing approaches?
So as I look at this data, this is where I feel that the IAM approaches that we have today are starting to show their limitations. To rewind back, the traditional IAM was built around humans. What I mean by that is users logging in, requesting access, performing relatively predictable actions, what they are supposed to do, what they are not supposed to do. And as I mentioned a few minutes back, AI agents don't behave that way. They can chain together dozens of actions across multiple systems in a matter of milliseconds, often using legitimate credentials, approved access paths. The problem is no longer about authentication. The problem is what happens after authentication at runtime. Once an agent has access, organizations need a way to continuously evaluate what it's doing, whether its actions remain within policy or whether something needs to be stopped before a destructive action or a damage occurs. That's why we are seeing this growing interest in this term runtime control and continuous authorization, rather than relying solely on the access decisions made at the beginning of the session, right? And it's what matters at runtime more than what was dictated to the agent upfront in terms of what it can access and what actions it can take.
Great, thanks, Suresh. So I've just got one more finding for you today, and this just is one that really stood out is that organizations are not ignoring these challenges. So with a slightly more futuristic look, we see that 97% say that they do plan to strengthen AI agent security over the next 12 months. So this is really not an awareness gap at this point. It's that organizations can see that AI agents introduce that different kind of security and access challenge. But the bigger question is then, how do they respond in a way that allows them to scale AI safely? So Suresh, that feels like a good point just to pass over to you for a summary on your side of the findings and what you believe those priorities should be for organizations.
So when I look at this, this is exactly the findings that came from our early customer inquiries when agentic adoption started almost 8 to 12 months back, that led to us developing our agentic security product. So it's clear, it's pretty clear, right? You can't govern AI agents if you don't know they exist, what they access, or who owns them. So the visibility becomes a factor. Then they need to reduce reliance on persistent credentials. We talked about why that is an issue. That has been an issue even before the rise of the agents, secret sprawl and credentials in code and configuration files. And now agents carry those credentials and can access multiple systems in milliseconds, and can also, they can also be revealed through prompt injection. They can be coaxed into sort of sharing what the credentials are. The controls need to extend beyond authentication and into runtime. I talked about why that runtime factor is important in the world of AI agents as well. And finally, they need clear ownership and accountability, just like any other identity operating inside the organization. Now, we need to take these together. They aren't 4 separate projects. They are a foundation of an identity model built for autonomous systems. But now that you are at the last of the findings of your data, hopefully I can take a couple of minutes to tell our audience about how we can help with this. So if they have these challenges, we are happy to help. Akeyless recently announced what we called Agentic Runtime Authority. And what it basically does is, you can see some of it in the screenshot where you see 14 active sessions. You can see all the active sessions that your agents are having. You can see the actions that they are taking, a risk score associated with the actions based on the resources that they are accessing. You can block requests automatically using both deterministic and non-deterministic policies. And what I mean by that is, your deterministic policies are your RBAC and ABAC and predefined policies. And non-deterministic is an intent-based engine. And if you go back to the example of the Pocket OS where a database were deleted, assume that world. But in this case, when the agent decides to delete the database, there is an intervention that would happen if they were using agentic runtime authority that would have asked or tried to determine the intent behind the need for deleting the database. If it finds out that, hey, it is because the agent is trying to bypass a requirement to complete the task, and it determines that the database is too critical for that intent to be bypassed, it will block that action. It will alert the administrators, and it happens at runtime, which is what is a critical aspect of the non-deterministic policies, because they are going to behave, they are going to hallucinate, they are going to take actions with legitimate access. And we need the ability to block suspicious activity based on dynamic AI-based policies. And of course, there is an aspect of the full forensic audit and traceability. What was prompted? What was asked? What was the response? Why was it blocked? And you need to be able to see this in runtime, in real time, not after the fact, not a post-mortem. And this is what the Akeyless Agentic Runtime Authority will enable you to do as well. And why don't I ask Callum to help summarize the key takeaways, and then we will open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Suresh. So if I just pull together some of the main threads that we've spoken about today. So for me, the first takeaway is that AI agents already have access to sensitive systems, data, and workflows. And that's not a future state issue. That's already happening in meaningful parts of the organization. And the second takeaway is that the identity model has not fully caught up. So organizations are still relying on persistent credentials, fragmented controls, and approaches that were largely designed for human users or more predictable machine workloads. The third point is that risk is already showing up in practical ways. So respondents reported that they suspected unauthorized access, they experiencing credential exposure, and they've already faced significant costs and effort tied to remediation. And the final takeaway for me is the positive side of the story. Organizations that modernize identity controls will be better positioned to scale AI securely. So the message from the research is not that organizations should slow down or avoid AI agents. It's that the identity and access model needs to evolve alongside them. And that really was a snapshot of the research. So if you found those findings interesting, there's a full report on the Akeyless website to rummage through as well in your own time. But with that, I'll move on to the Q&A.
Just before we jump into the Q&A, there is a Q&A panel. Please ask your questions there. I see 3 of them already popped up. I'll go through those, but I want to take a moment to thank Callum and the MRA research team for this research conducted in big markets like US and UK, where agentic adoption is actually at its peak right now. And this is not just for companies like us to inform our go-to-market and understand what is happening in the market. I hope sharing these research with you also helps opens some insight into what your colleagues are doing in the IT and security space and what you can learn from this as well. Now let's jump into questions. Let's see what the first one is. My organization already uses Okta. Why isn't that enough for AI agents? Now, generally speaking, I respect all competition. Okta is a great company, so I don't want to specifically get into any criticism of Okta. But what I would say is I'd go back to this conversation that we had on systems built for humans versus systems built for machine/agentic and AI agents, right? The challenge is that AI agents don't behave like human users. They are ephemeral, autonomous, and they often exist for seconds, maybe even milliseconds rather than years. And they can also spin off sub-agents, the agents that are created in runtime to take a specific action for that agent to complete its task. Traditional IAM has always assumed that you have to inventory identities, assign permissions, govern them through a directory. Now, that model worked well for employees and users. It has become much more harder when agents can be created dynamically. As I said, they spawn sub-agents and disappear even before anyone knows that they existed, right? That is a completely different world from a more structured, registry-based approach to identity and access management. More importantly, authentication isn't the hard part. An AI agent can have a perfectly valid identity, a perfectly valid token, defined set of rules, and can still take an action that you never intended. The question isn't just who is the agent, what is the agent trying to do. It is more broader than that. It's what the agent can do at runtime, and how do we evaluate based on intent and block it. And that is the systemic difference between the products built for the traditional human IAM world and the products being built for the ones like Agentic Runtime Authority that we are building for the emerging challenges with AI agents. Okay, next question. I believe, Callum, this could be for you. Which finding surprised you the most? Why?
Good question. So the thing that probably surprised me the most was we had the stat earlier. 60% of organizations suspect that AI agents have already accessed data beyond their intended scope. And for me, that was a really, really remarkably high number, especially considering how early we are relatively in that AI agent adoption cycle. It suggested that organizations aren't just worried about future risk. Many believe they've already seen signs of agents operating outside of those intended boundaries. So what's interesting is that it doesn't necessarily mean intentionally malicious activity. It may simply be how difficult it is to define, monitor, and constrain agent behavior once agents are interacting across those multiple systems and data sources. But it also highlights that broader challenge. many organizations lack confidence that they can fully observe what their AI agents are doing after access has been granted. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on as we continue to see the AI agent rise continue.
There are two things that surprised me about that statement. One is, of course, the 67% number, but the other was that 67% of organizations suspect AI agents have already accessed the data, which means that they don't yet know how much of the data they access. They still don't have visibility into that. There is a suspicion that this may have happened, which is even more concerning because the systems don't exist to actually know what happened at runtime and what behaviors happen. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What's the biggest mistake organizations are making when they start deploying AI agents? This is a very common question when someone in the prospects that I talk to, they want to know what others are doing. So they're asking these questions to us as well. When we go and they're like, hey, we are talking to a pharma company, they want to know what did another pharma company that's also our customer do for it. I'd say that there is a lot to say here, and there are more qualified people to answer this question. But I would say that uh, the biggest thing to avoid doing is treating AI agents like software instead of identities. We have already done that world of software. There has been software-related code security. There is SaaS security. The systems for the software world were built. Don't make the mistake of assuming an agent is another SaaS application. I know this is many of you will already agree with it, but this is something that is still out there where people believe that the technologies that were built for applications and even machines could be used in an agentic world. Machines certainly has some of the behavioral characteristics that can support it, but it doesn't. Even machines and access are predefined on what they can access, what they can control, whereas an AI agent can take access can access and make decisions with legitimate access controls and approved authority. So it's important that we don't treat them the same way. Agents have credentials, permissions, they have delegated authority, they access sensitive information. So if you don't establish ownership, visibility, access controls, all these issues become harder to solve later. The biggest lesson from this research in general is that identity should be a part of the design process and not something that you add after the deployment. And that's why even the entire research centered around the agentic risk with identity. Looks like those are the questions that we have for now. Callum, I want to take this moment to thank you and your firm again for this research, very professionally done with a lot of big companies and what's happening in the industry. A lot of surprising findings for us. As much as we have conversations with customers and prospects, the volume of data and amount of information that researchers like this provide is always insightful. And I hope all of you here, these are actually research and results that are from your peers and organization like yours that have conducted. So hopefully you took away some insight into this as well. And of course, I would be amiss if I don't say if there is any way Akeyless could help you solve these problems and challenges with our Agentic Authority product and our underlying machine identity foundation. Please explore our solutions at the Akeyless website, request a demo. We are happy to help. Thank you, Callum. Thank you, team, for joining.
Thanks, Suresh. Thanks, everyone.